Hey everybody, how's it going? My name's Miklosh Power. I'm a composer and producer from Australia, and I just launched a new act here last month on the 13th of March called Seraphonica. It's basically a 70-minute electronic symphony in a crossover genre, so it's really a mixture of electronica, classical, sort of film score, soundtrack, and world music all rolled into one. And I wrote this together with an immensely talented producer and composer from New Zealand, Malcolm Welsford. And what I thought I'd do today is just show you a brass theme that I wrote that appears about midway through the whole experience, and just break that down a little bit and show you how I used Vienna software and libraries to actually realize that and make it happen. So I hope you enjoy it, and thanks a lot for watching. Okay, so what I've got here is the trumpet section. I'll just go through it section by section, and then I'll show you how the whole brass ensemble fits in with the finished music at the end. So this one, the way I've got it set up is I've got the trumpet 6 in the melodic position and the 4 trumpets from the Dimensions Brass Library in the harmonic positions. And I started off with 2 of those 4 trumpets here, then built it up to 3 and then 4 at the end. So for a total of 10 trumpets by the time it reaches the last repetition there. So it's just a subtle way that it kind of builds and develops over time. And then I've also got trumpet in B flat doing this trill here at the end. So just a quick point about what sort of one of the elements that contributes to this this whole thing is that all these parts are not quantized, and they're all individual separate performances with different controller data, which is harder to get right than you would think for this sort of thing, especially because the actual swelling of the instruments is kind of a key part to the whole phrasing that's going on there. But it's worth the effort because the slight differences, you can see this is far from kind of neat and tidy or whatever, really go a long way to when you stack all the instruments up to creating that realism, because it's kind of what really happens in a real recording. It's not necessarily perfect. So I'll give you a listen to the theme now. Okay, so now we'll have a look at the horns. It's a similar kind of idea where I've got the horns 4 library together with the 4 independent horns from Dimensions Brass. And the horns 4 is in the melodic position, except for this last kind of repetition here where it drops down an octave. So it's just another way that that it's sort of developing and changing over the course of a theme. So I'll give you a listen to that now. Okay, so now I've got the trombones. I've just used the 4 Dimensions Brass trombones because that's all it needed, and I've also got the low brass in there as well. So that was plenty for the bottom end. Remember as well, it's crossover genre. It's going to have a big electronic bass in there as well, so I didn't need too much stuff down the bottom end. Okay, and now the low brass. So these are essentially just playing fifths. Okay, so just having a look at the actual instruments, the way they're set up in here. The main feature I want to point out is, well, first of all, I'm using velocity crossfade, obviously, and that's to get that natural swelling effect with the brass. But mainly what I want to point out is the humanize feature. So there is a different preset for every instrument going on here. So especially with brass and strings, it's very, very effective. It basically means that there's a very slightly different pitch envelope for the start of all of these notes going through the whole ensemble. So when you add that up across all the many instruments in the whole ensemble, it has a really good effect on the final result, especially when you combine that with the kind of organic performances and all of the other details in the library itself, where there are all individual separate instruments recorded with separate players. It really combines together to really have a very dramatic impact on the final result. Now, also from a mix point of view, just very quickly on Mia, I've used a pretty close mic setup here for Dimensions Brass. And I've got the horns facing the back of the hall because I really liked that effect for this particular part. And what I've basically used Mia here for is basically a very sophisticated, directional and placement tool just to kind of give those cues to where the instruments are. And it's very, very effective for that. Now, I didn't really want to go for a pure hall sound here. So I've just used this for, early reflections primarily. And it's a fairly dry signal coming out of this, and then that went into a Bricasti M7. And then for the other brass parts, that's the horns for trumpet 6 and the trumpet in B flat. I've got a different configuration slightly. It's the same hall, but it's got a lot more distance. And then when that went out to the hardware reverb, there were slightly different parameters, again, to just match that kind of setting of giving a bit more space and distance. And when you combine those two together, it just gives you an additional sense of depth and realism, I think, particularly because I'm using the same hall but in a different position. So I thought it was really effective for that. So again, all these subtle changes and different technologies and the performance and all of that stuff just working together to affect the final result. Okay, so let's have a listen to how the whole brass section sounds together first. Okay, so what I've got here is basically a stem mix of the final piece, just so you can have a listen to how that brass section fits into the final piece of music. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that, and thanks a lot for watching.